This week's podcast episode is talking about other cruise lines, which is a topic that got me in a lot of trouble last time when I did my review of the Cruise Critic Awards. A lot of you really didn't like my thoughts on how Virgin Voyages operates, and today we're going back for a different change, some news to cover. I think it's kind of interesting, and I wanted to talk about it. And that is Norwegian Cruise Line has a major shakeup in its leadership, and it really caught my attention. Its president and CEO, Harry Sommer, has been replaced with former Subway and Burger King CEO John Chidsey, and I hope I said his last name correctly. I don't follow NCL nearly as closely as I do Royal Caribbean. I kind of, they're a major cruise line, just like Carnival or even, Virgin or Disney. So obviously I know of the big things that are happening there, but I don't follow their day-to-day stuff. Needless to say, this is a big deal because there's for two reasons. First and foremost, it appears Harry Sommer is gone. Like, usually when an executive goes and leaves, there's a bit of a, thanks to the memories, thanks to the good times, let's celebrate your tenure here, even if he's going to another job. Like, at least there's a little bit of a transition. When he's here one day and gone the next, and there's none of that, I'm not saying it's a red flag. I'm saying it's not a good look. Let's put it that way. So you've got that aspect to it. The other aspect to it is Chidsey, who's coming in to replace him. And he was the CEO at Subway from 2019 to 2024. And then had a tenure as CEO at Burger King Holdings. He also served as CEO of two divisions at Cendant Corporation, Vehicle Services and Financial Services. At the time, Cendant owned rental car brands Avis and Budget. So that's kind of surprising. He's not part of the maritime industry at all. And very typically, not always, but typically, the cruising industry is very insular. A lot of people are lifers. They start out at whatever they start off with, move up, and they work within the cruise industry for a long time. You don't see a lot of, especially executives, coming in from outside. That's not a hard and fast rule. There are exceptions to this. But I'm just saying, usually you don't see somebody coming from a completely different industry and coming in here. But NCL is kind of interesting. We had on our sister site, cruise.blog. Yeah, we have another website, cruise.blog, which covers the rest of the cruise industry. We do our annual cruise rankings. Now, I'm not part of the rankings. My staff takes care of that. But one of the things we wanted to talk about, which is always important, is what's the worst cruise line? And we kind of hemmed and hawed about it. The year prior, in 2025, it's 24 and 25, we named Margaritaville at sea the worst cruise line. I think that distinction is not deserved at all anymore. I think they've done a really good job of moving up. But we actually, and I'll take credit for it, I guess, or blame, however you want to look at it. I said NCL is the worst cruise line right now. NCL seems to be adrift. They've been adrift for a while. They just, ever since COVID, they have never really come back with a succinct, vision or idea for the future. I mean, you can say all you want about Carnival Cruise Line and some of the changes they made, and many for the worst. At least they've had a vision. At least they've had a direction they've been going in. NCL is just like, we're building small ships, we're building big ships, we're building this. They just never seem to have anything. Their new commercial, that I don't understand this new marketing at all. It's that, I don't know if you've seen it yet, it's that one where it's 18th century sailors on a pirate ship or something like that, and they're and it transitions into a cruise. I don't what? And yeah, not every cruise line needs to do what Royal Caribbean does. I'm far from it, but it just seems like NCL has been kind of adrift, kind of not with a lot of direction. You can see this in their stock price, and stock price isn't a measure of everything, obviously, but certainly compared to Carnival and Royal Caribbean, it's way third. And I feel like they're no longer really even though they may have the third largest market share, I just don't think they're where they used to be, and it's really strange. So this shakeup in leadership is not 100% out of the blue. If you have a company that's kind of languishing to some extent, and I say languishing only from the perspective of their stock price, and maybe, I get the things I just brought up in terms of the direction and whatnot, a change in leadership makes sense. Certainly you don't want to bring in, maybe you don't want to bring him, I would assume you wouldn't want to bring in the number two person behind the departing CEO, Harry Sommer, to, who would theoretically be part two, right? When Royal Caribbean Group transitioned from Richard Fain to Jason Liberty, Jason Liberty was taking Richard Fain's playbook, and he's made some changes since then, but at least it was kind of in that lineage, right? Here, this is completely out of left field. And that's what's really surprising to me as to what that kind of a change will do to it. because NCL is, like I said, just been in this weird position. And this comes also, by the way, less than 6 months after former NCL president David Herrera stepped down from his role. And like Harry Summer basically was like the Richard Fain, and it's kind of not convoluted, it's a little weird anyway in terms of how this all works. But anyway, what I'm interested to see is what changes will be made here, because you've got an outsider coming in and someone who's in charge of Burger King and Subway. So obviously not exactly like, the same market at all, other than they're dealing with the general public. Certainly, if $5 footlongs made it their way to cruise ships or Whoppers, I don't know that I would hate that, but I mean, obviously, if he's the former CEO, I doubt he has that kind of connection anyway. But I digress. The point is what will the future hold for NCL as they move forward? Because as an outsider, either he's going to shake things up completely, and sometimes shaking things up completely is good because it, gets people out of their comfort zone and they think outside the box, and you get new ideas that make the company better. Sometimes you bring in really bad ideas that are outside the box and it goes completely in the wrong direction. Like there's like a certain amount of innovation that's good to think differently, but too much of it and you go way out of your comfort zone and way out of what I think maybe their customer base is expecting, because cruise lines really serve two masters. And this is a gross generalization, but go with me on this one. One is their loyalty members, people that cruise a lot. In our case here in Royal Caribbean's land, we're talking about Crown and Anchor members, people that cruise, often, and they're, Diamond members, Pinnacle members, right? NCL has that contingent as well. But the other one is the new to cruise market. And in the case of both NCL and Royal Caribbean, that's the bigger market per se, in terms of the sheer amount of people. I'm just talking volume, not anything else. So you've got to appeal to both. And if you try to go too far off into no man's land and try to appeal to the new cruiser market and completely abandon your loyal cruisers to the point where they feel like they're being ignored and the product is changing so much so it's unrecognizable, then you really are betting on the new cruise market. Meanwhile, you're killing your base, right? And that's not good for business. At the same time, you can't just go square over to your loyal cruisers, give them everything they ever want, and then try to figure out why none of the new cruisers care or notice your product. That's really the issue right there. I don't know anything if Mr. Chisley is going to, how much he knows about the cruise industry, how much his vision is for things. I mean, in some cases, you get CEOs who come in from somewhere completely different and end up doing pretty darn well. And in other cases, not so much. And for the record, by the way, there's plenty of people who come up through the ranks and end up being terrible CEOs. So it's not like you need to have someone in the industry to be a great CEO. But I think there's so many like cruise specific things. Like if he was coming from Marriott or a land-based resort, yeah, there are similarities, but there are differences still. Here, he's coming from something completely different. But, being CEO doesn't require you to do the day-to-day job of, marketing the company. I mean, really, as a good CEO, I would think you'd want to hire the right people and, enable your people to make the right choices and open doors and reduce obstacles, right? He could do that. It's just not, he doesn't come with a resume that you look at and go, that's my guy. This guy is going to be like, the problem solver. We don't know. I mean, ultimately, nobody knows there. But his lack of experience within, travel in general, let alone the cruise industry, isn't very comforting. And I should have mentioned this earlier before somebody posts in the comments. He's coming in as the new CEO of Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings. So this is like Royal Caribbean Group, as I mentioned earlier, whereas NCL has a different CEO. It's like the Michael Bailey, right? He's not Michael Bailey. He's Jason Liberty is basically what that difference is there. So I hope that makes some sense, because that can be confusing in and of itself. I'd be remiss also if I didn't talk about NCL's past going before Harry Summer. Harry Summer, I don't know why he left, but he left. We'll move past that for a second. His predecessor was Kevin O'Sheehan, who had an issue and left the company after a month-long investigation that showed that there was a pattern of, quote, personal and professional misconduct and recklessness, stunning in scope and hubris, corrosive and detrimental in its nature. I don't want to get into it all. I'm just saying that there was an issue there with its former CEO. Harry Summer comes in, takes over. Things, they fixed, I guess, that problem. But then again, the company has been kind of maligned a little bit, in my opinion. And now we have a new CEO here. So it's not quite musical chairs of CEOs, but NCL, again, has bigger issues in general. And I think this also speaks to why I believe the cruise line hasn't really ever recovered in the last 6 years or so now in terms of being able to really move forward and challenge certainly other cruise lines, or at least just, even if you don't want to compete with other cruise lines, just stand up on your own and be like, this is a viable alternative right there. Now, again, I'm not an NCL fan. I don't really follow a lot what they're doing, so I freely admit that. But when you're changing CEOs and your CEO, again, A, leaves the company abruptly, and B, is replaced by someone who's not from the cruise industry, it's going to raise some eyebrows. It certainly did for me, and I was really surprised that they picked someone who's really, their main background is not travel or even forget maritime, just not even travel at all. It's fast food. It's very curious, certainly. The only parallel that I can think of, I was trying to think of, like, is there an example in business that reminds me of this? And unfortunately, John Sculley comes to mind. John Sculley was the president of PepsiCo. And then he was brought in to be CEO of Apple after Steve Jobs was kicked out. And it was a atrocious decision in retrospect, because obviously Apple didn't do very well. And then he was actually ultimately replaced back by Steve Jobs. I don't really know if that's an appropriate parallel, but it just kind of reminds me of somebody coming in from a completely different industry to replace somebody. Now, obviously, I don't think Harry Summer is Steve Jobs. I don't think this will be a situation where Harry comes back in so many years and is a visionary like Steve was, but it's just kind of an interesting parallel in the sense that, again, somebody who comes from a different background ultimately replaces the CEO who is, within that background. I don't know. But it's something to keep an eye on, and I'll be curious. It'll be years before we really see the result of this, right? Because we're here in 2026. You got to give the dude at least 2-3 years minimum before you can really see a kind of direction, because there are things already in motion, right? I mean, he could come in here and be like, we're getting rid of all our marketing and doing this and, really cleaning house, but probably not, especially since he's not within the cruise industry to begin with. I think there's going to be a learning curve for him, and I suspect that part of that will be to learn everything. So again, I think this will be a couple of years before we really see what happens for NCL. It's just interesting as you look at it I think as a cruise fan, it's hard not to ignore what other cruise lines, especially the major lines, are doing here. And Carnival and NCL are two that, as a Royal Caribbean fan, I will always look to see, is there something going on over there that we need to pay attention to? All right, friends, I'm going to answer listener emails. First email is from Mason. Hi, Matt. I was wondering if wind noise is normal on an Oasis class Central Park balcony room. I was on Oasis of the Seas last year in the Caribbean, and we had lots of wind noise the last 2 nights, and I'm wondering if this is normal. It is normal in the sense that, yes, wind can be a factor. I mean, if it's very windy out, balcony rooms can definitely have that sound. I've had it many a time. When it's like just normal windy, like, just not very windy, then it's usually not an issue at all. But if the winds are particularly strong, then yes, you usually do hear it in your room. It's not unusual to hear that. So good news, bad news. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody like, we should book a balcony room because of that. I think it's unlikely that the weather conditions will be quite that bad. But even so, it's usually not a major problem unless you're a very light sleeper. And I'm generally kind of a light sleeper, but I find that the noise is noticeable but not problematic. I think, quite frankly, the noise from in any cabin that have the hangers moving around, that makes way more noise. Next email is from Bob. If this question is something that might cause a problem, I understand if you don't want to answer. If I took my granddaughter on a cruise and she has the same last name, would she receive the same status as me? If she would, when she would go on her next cruise with her parents, would the Crown Anchors have transferred to them? Thanks for all you do with this channel and blogs. It helps fill the time between cruises. And the answer is no, it would not transfer. The status that you have, Bob, is for your spouse, and any of your children who would be under the age of 18. Your granddaughter, even though she's sharing a room with you, wouldn't count for that, unfortunately. So she would not get it. And this would apply, by the way, if you were sharing a room with, someone who's not related to you. So, to answer your question, no. Next email is coming to us from Mike from Lexington, Ohio. Thanks for all you do. Me and my wife will be on Oasis of the Seas in March. We'll also be on Star of the Seas next May. Would like to possibly add people on that one. It's something that I can do while on Oasis. It is, but I would tell you this. I would, in general, your friends that you want to book, like if you want to, I guess the question is, how do I say this? If your question is, can your friends book a reservation? Of course they can. But if you're saying, hey, we booked a cabin, we have a reservation, and it's for 2, and I want to add 2 more people to our room, in that scenario, being on board the ship is irrelevant. You possibly can, but you're going to need to change rooms. When you book a cabin, you're usually, 9 out of 10 times, that cabin is designed for the amount of people in your room. What I mean by this is if you booked it for 2 people, that cabin has a capacity of 2 people. To add 2 people, as an example, so the capacity is now 4, you would need to move to a different subcategory. It's still, a balcony or whatever, but it's a different category. It triggers a reprice. So the answer is yes, provided there's still rooms available, and provided that you're going to get a reprice. So it's going to cost you probably, almost certainly, more money. If your question, though, was like, hey, can they also book the same cruise I'm on in a different room? Sure, but don't wait till you're on board the ship on Oasis. I would book them now. But you can at Next Cruise. I'm answering 3 different questions here. But if you were on board the ship, yes, you can reserve a reservation for other people while on board. I forget what the limit is on that, but I believe the answer is yes on that. Our next email is from Alex from Alabama. I haven't sailed on a Royal Caribbean in a long time, back in 2008. Too many issues, but still heading on Brilliance of the Seas in October to Greece. I'm Diamond Plus. I've never sent a block. Can I get one on board? And can you give me the Cliff Notes version of what to expect? Any must-sees for the itinerary? Best way to see Santorini is Viator an okay option. Man, Alex has the email. I feel like we could spend like half an hour on your email alone. So for the blocks, once you reach 140 cruise points, you get your first crystal block. And so basically you don't get one until you actually reach that point threshold. So if during the course of your cruise, I have no idea what point you're starting at, but if you were starting this cruise off with 138 points after 2 nights, you would get your crystal block delivered to you automatically. There's nothing you need to do about that or ask about it. As for your Cliff Notes version of what to expect, my goodness, I mean, your itinerary is amazing, Greece. I haven't been there yet, but one thing you should be aware of, Alex, the most important thing I would imagine, is this year there's something new. Royal Caribbean will be opening a new beach club in Santorini. It's interesting you mentioned that particular island. We don't have full details yet, although I believe you can actually book it already on the cruise planner. But basically, this is Royal Caribbean took over an existing beach club and is converting it in some manner to be a Royal Beach Club. This is a little bit different than what's happening in Nassau or Cozumel, where they're, bulldozing the site and building a brand new club in its place. This is more of a conversion process. Is Viator an okay option? Yeah, I've booked many excursions with the Viator. They're usually a very good one. Like all short excursions you book on your own, you should read reviews. Make sure that, because Viator is just a middleman, right? They're selling them to you, but make sure that all the reviews look good. You get good reviews out of it. And if that looks good, then yeah, I would say you're probably in a good space for that. Our next email is from Adam Cartman. Hey, Matt, our upcoming itinerary has stops in Costa Maya and Belize City. We usually go to places like Paradise Beach, but not seeing many options in these 2 ports. Any suggestions what we should do? We have 2 kids, ages 7 and 14, who aren't really beach people, but love pools. This is an interesting one. So Costa Maya, my usual go-to spot is Maya Chan. And Maya Chan is a beach. It's an all-inclusive experience. They do have a pool, actually. And it's not a bad pool, honestly. It's not Paradise Beach level pool. This is more of a mom and pop shop type thing. But I think they'll like the pool. It's got a deck. Usually most people are kind of over in the beach anyway, so you shouldn't be too busy over there. I might at least look at some videos and photos of Maya Chan. Again, this is not booked through Royal Caribbean. If you book it on your own. But I've been going there for years. Love that place. Other than that, there are other beach clubs within Costa Maya, but not many have a pool. I seem to recall National Beach Club in Costa Maya. Is that a thing? I'm going to Google this as we Costa Maya National Beach Club. Is this now? I believe they do have a pool, but I also believe their pricing was insane. So I'm not sure I'd recommend them, but that's another option to at least look at. But otherwise, there is a pool. That being said, I should mention this also. Within Costa Maya itself, the port, not the town of Mahawal, but the actual port area, there is a free pool. I'm using air quotes because you can go there for free. And it's a large pool. It is more Paradise Beach-esque. The issue is it's free because they're assuming you're going to sit there and spend like $30 on a drink because everything's like way overpriced. But, I mean, it is definitely a nice pool. But it can get crowded as well. So I don't know. I'm giving you kind of lame-o answers here. For Belize, I got nothing for you. I've been to Belize like 2 times. The last time I was in Belize might have been, what year is it? 2026? I mean, it might have been 10 years ago, if not more. The issue with Belize is not many ships go there. It's a tender port, and Belize has not a lot going on. The last time we went there, we went through Royal Caribbean, and we booked a private tour through Private Journeys, and it's funny, I should probably do another Private Journeys excursion through them because it's been many years since I've actually done one. I'm just curious how it still stacks up. But anyway, long story short, when we went there, we did a private tour that took us to the National Zoo, and then we went to a restaurant, and then we went to a beach. There was no pool there. But it was more of a customized tour. That might be an option, but maybe Viator.com, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, Adam, you might find some. I would definitely have, like, Belize is not a port to wing it in. You got to have a tour ahead of time. So I would definitely have a plan of action to do there. So sorry I'm not very helpful, but I hope the Costa Maya stuff will help you a little bit. Next email is from Scott Beering. Hey, Matt. We're scheduled to be stopping St. Thomas on our holiday cruise at the end of the year, but now I'm seeing our time in port is only 1 to 6:30, meaning our time is really short to travel St. John's and Trunk Bay, as you suggested. Based on the short window, would it make sense to go to Magens Bay by taxi, or have you been seen at higher capacity? Maybe we just run around the town. We're in St. Martin the next day and plan to do Morgan Resort that you mentioned, but feel for the price of $174 a person to get to Trunk Bay may be a waste of opportunity for something else. Again, it's, as you say, very subjective for the cost, but an hour in Trunk Bay seems like a joke, just lowered from 2. Yeah, listen, Scott, I have done that exact tour to Trunk Bay where I've had about 90 minutes at the beach. It's very short. It's not cheap. I will say, and I think I said this before when I recommended Trunk Bay and St. John in general, it's the most beautiful beach I've ever been to in my life. That 90 minutes I think was worth it. Now, that being said, yes, you're way overpaying for it. You'll spend more time commuting back and forth than you will at the beach, but like at the end of the day, that kind of matters to me. I'll point out the drive to Magens Bay is not short. It's not as long as obviously getting from your ship to Trunk Bay and St. John's, but it's not like it's a hop, skip, and a jump, like right around the corner. It's still a bit of a commute, so I don't want to make it seem like, but yes, you probably would have more than 60 or 90 minutes over there. So it's kind of, I guess part of the answer to your question is, Scott, is, and I think you've been listening to this podcast for a while, so if you cruise a lot, and odds are you'll be coming back to St. Thomas many more times in the future, sure, go to Magens Bay, go to Emerald Beach, which is a lot closer, and for that short period of time might be a better choice for you. But if you're somebody who is like, well, I don't cruise a lot, or I'm not sure the next time we'll actually go to St. Thomas, if ever, if this were your only visit ever to St. Thomas, I'd go to St. John's for that, to be able to say you've been to that beach, Trunk Bay, and for that water. But if you're, I don't want to say I've been there, done that, but if you cruise a fair amount, or at least you're once a year cruiser, odds are you'll probably come back again, and that's why I feel like it would be worth, rolling the dice on it. And our last email is from Joe. Hey, Matt, for my future cruises in the Caribbean, I'll opt for more personalized excursions that go with the cruise line. I have some concerns about not having problems. I'd like to book with companies that guarantee returning the ship on time and have a good reputation. Do you have any suggestions? Joe, thanks for the email. First and foremost, I didn't realize this episode was going to be all excursion questions, which is fine. Just kind of interesting that I happen to get all these questions about excursions. So you want a company that guarantees returning to the ship. None of them do that. None of them can promise you that, Joe, because, life happens. I will say this, when it comes to your fears are not unwarranted. I think when you're deciding between a roller coaster excursion and a third-party excursion, reviews are king. Not one or two, but a lot of reviews. If you search a particular tour operator, a particular excursion like on Viator, and there are a lot of good, positive reviews, overwhelmingly, dozens of good reviews, then it's probably good, right? What you don't want to do is book an excursion that has no reviews, or only has 1 or 2, or the last review was from 3 years ago. You want someone who's been there, done that, and preferably, not always necessary, but preferably is catering to cruise ship guests. So what I mean by that is they market the excursion as a tour, within the language, the verbiage, hey, it's a cruise ship excursion for this, or it's for cruise guests. You see this a lot in Alaska. When I was in Europe, there were far more tours that were offered through third parties that weren't necessarily for cruise guests. In fact, when I was in one port in Spain, I did a tour of the city, and it was great. But I was the only cruise ship passenger there. Everybody else were tourists that were there, staying in the city, which is fine. I made sure the timing was perfect. I had more than enough time to get there in the morning, and it ended well before I had to be back on board, right? It's not critical you do that, but really this is about, I think, finding good reviews, making sure the company is, enough people have vetted it for you. And the other thing is also time management and making sure that you have enough time. How much is enough time, Matt? Great question. I would usually plan to be back on the ship at least 2 hours before all aboard time. That basically bakes in an hour delay, which would be insane. Traffic, you lose track of time, bathroom stop, whatever. You'd still be back with an hour to spare. I find in my experience, I'm not promising anything, but in my experience, that usually works. Joe, thanks for the email. Thanks to everybody for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. You can always email me your questions about excursions or not by emailing it to matt, M-A-T-T, @royalcaribbeanblog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.